Well, happy Monday, everybody. So glad you've joined me for today's devotion. We are beginning the book of Ezra, which is the story of the Jewish people returning from exile in Babylon. You'll remember last year when we were reading the book of Jeremiah, as well as some of the passages in Kings and Chronicles. The southern kingdom of Judah collapsed because of one wicked king after another, and God allowed Babylon to conquer the nation, destroy the city, burn the temple, and through three successive deportations, deported most of the people away as captives to settle them in different parts of Babylon and Persia and other places. And Jeremiah, the prophet, had said they would be in exile 70 years and then return. God would restore them and they would return to the promised land. Well, Ezra is the historical record of that return. And verse 1, and if you've read this chapter already, it's a short chapter, just 11 verses, but if you read it, look at verse 1. He says, now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, the Persians conquered the Babylonians. And so when that happened, Cyrus, the king of Persia, they had all of these captives because the Babylonians, and even prior to that, the Assyrians, had deported many people from many nations and settled them in all parts of that part of Asia and stuff, where today Iraq, Iran, and other nations would be. And so now Cyrus and his country, Persia, rule that area, and they've got all these captives. What's he going to do? Is he going to keep them there? What's going to be his policy? Well, his policy was not to deport people the way the Babylonians and Assyrians had done. So in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that's after they conquer the Babylonian Empire, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he sent a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and also put it in writing, saying, and then he goes on to let the Jewish people in particular return to Jerusalem and rebuild the city and rebuild the temple, and he provides financial assistance to them along the way. Now, the events of Ezra 1 take place about 538, 530 BC. Jeremiah had said they would be in captivity 70 years. So how does the timeline match up? Well, there's a couple of ways to think about this. And remember, 70 years, I mean 7 decades. Don't hold it to a precise number of years, but it's the time frame. One way of looking at the 70 years is there were 3 distinct deportations. The first one, which was a smaller one, was in 605, 606 BC, which included Daniel and his friends. And then you had the one in 598, 597 BC that included Ezekiel, the prophet. Then you had the one in 587, 586 BC, which was the largest of them. Well, if you count from the first one with Daniel in like 605, 606 BC, down to 538, 537 BC, that's anywhere from 67 to 69 years, so 70 years. You got it. Another way some people count this, and we'll get into this later in another devotion, is when they were rebuilding the temple and so on around 516. If you count that from the third deportation, around 587, 586, that's essentially 70 years, not from when they returned, but from when they rebuilt the temple. So either way, you get approximately the 70 years. Now, what's interesting to me is the way it's recorded in this book is that this was Cyrus' policy, okay? But what the scripture tells us is that God worked in Cyrus and stirred up his spirit, his heart, to want to do this. The point is that God is always at work, and God can move pagans, and they may even think it's their own idea, but God can move pagans to do things that are good and right. God can stir up pagans to accomplish his will, his purpose, and he did that here with Cyrus, the Persian king. So just bear that in mind. God can do that. Something else, verses 2 and following is just the declaration to free them and for everybody to bless them and help them financially return and so on. And then I think it's verse 7, or verse 5 rather, God stirred the heart of some of the Jews, some of the exiles, to return to Jerusalem. Here's the thing, not all of the exiles, not all of the descendants of the exile returned to Jerusalem. Many, many, many did, but a large number did not. They just, and that's why as the centuries go by, you found Jewish populations in other cities throughout the Middle East and Northern Africa and Europe. They didn't all go back to Jerusalem when they could have. Something else to point out in verses 8 and 11, you have this leader of the Jewish people named Sheshbazzar. His Hebrew name, we know him as Zerubbabel. So just want to point that out to you. And kind of wrapping up this devotion, the takeaway for me is one, that God is always at work and God always keeps his promises. Through Jeremiah, he said 70 years, you'll be restored. That happened. God kept his promise. And God worked to stir up the hearts of some to go back. And God worked to stir in the heart of Cyrus to allow them to go back. So God is always at work. And sometimes he does it in ways that surprises us. And sometimes he works through people we don't expect him to work through. But he's God, and he can do it however he wants to do it. So trust him, be faithful to him, and just know that even when you don't think God is at work, he is always at work and always keeping his promises. Hey, God bless you, and I'll see you tomorrow as we look at this long list of people in chapter 2. But read it because there's truth in it. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.